I'm Jeannie Allen. Welcome to another episode of In Piazza. It's February 10th, and I'm live at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., with a number of the most incredible education innovators in the country. They represent the Yoss Prize, which is the Pulitzer Prize of Education, and you're going to learn more about them and that prize shortly. But they've been in Washington, D.C. from all around the country, visiting with people on Capitol Hill, their elected officials, governors from their home states, and they're sharing stories about their students. If you're like me and you want education to work for all children, I can't wait for you to hear from my next guests. So joining me today are Kanisha Skaggs from SOAR Academy, Corey Steiner from Northern Cass in North Dakota, and by the way, SOAR Academy is in Augusta, Georgia, and Brian Curcio from a tech company called Rapunzel, based in Chicago, but working all over the country. So Brian, I'm going to start with you. Tell our listeners, who are everything from parents to policymakers to really jealous educators that want to be in your position, why do you have a company named Rapunzel, and what does it do?
Yeah, so I think firstly, Rapunzel is a gamified financial literacy platform and aiming to make finances more accessible to students. And it really comes into just the name Rapunzel. People view the world of finance as something that's perched in this ivory tower, inaccessible to most people. So the idea of Rapunzel is rolling down that hair, providing equitable access so students can strive for financial freedom and kind of family-sustaining careers.
I know I'm still asking people questions about commodities and markets, and I don't understand it, and I should. And so I rely on other people, but I do know that kids out there know a lot more than they used to, but they really want to be satisfied. You're filling gaps, right? Because you're not going to wealthy suburban schools and saying, let me teach this to you.
No, absolutely not. So I think that, there's this kind of disconnect where a lot of people who most critically need financial literacy aren't taught it in schools. Financial literacy has become very generational, that if your parents don't teach it to you, you don't learn it. And so you're kind of we're graduating people and we're telling students, look, you're going to be successful, you're going to have a great career, but we don't prepare them for what's next, like create a bank account, managing credit. So it's really trying, and you're right that students are learning on their own. And so that was the idea of Rapunzel being on a mobile app, was trying to get students to meet them where they already are. And it's instead of scrolling TikTok, scroll through your stock portfolio. Look at different companies to invest.
And talk about learning on your own. And the name of this episode, I should have said, is Education 10.0, because we really are. We went beyond 2.0. We had COVID, and we have people doing amazing things across the country. So when I was growing up, and people who listen to In Piazza have heard me say this before, I was told what to do. It was traditional. I'm an Italian immigrant's daughter. Save your money, not why you save your money, not what you do with it. But I had no agency as a kid. My kids are not surprised, by the way, about that, the way I raised them. Corey, you are the epitome of the idea of student agency. When I first had someone tell me that there were public schools and other schools giving students the ability and the authority to kind of cast their own path, I'm like, how do they know what to do? So you're personalizing education and you're giving everybody that agency. Mm-hmm. How does that work? How do students actually figure out what they do on their own?
Yeah, so being a personalized, competency-based district, you have to be able to give up control, and that's tough. That's a scary, scary thing. But what we have found out with our learners is when you give up control and you coach them and you teach them that when you make a mistake, we correct that, and when you fail, we learn from that. It becomes a really beautiful thing. Schools are for kids, not for adults. And that's one of the biggest problems in public schools right now, is we're making it about adults. And when we give kids the power and the control to identify what they need and what they want, it's a beautiful thing. And it really is like these little small miracles that happen every single second of the day. And they're capable.
How does the classroom look different and define competency for everyone watching?
Yeah, so when we're talking competency, we're not talking standards. We're not talking about, I'm an old social studies guy. We're not talking about, you got to learn World War II. We're talking, hey, do you have accountability? Do you have a learner's mindset? Can you communicate? Can you be adaptable? So we're really focusing on those as the key skills that learners will take away. When we talk about a classroom, you don't have to stand up in front and give the information, because that information is accessible a million different ways right now. So the idea that, when I was growing up, yeah, the teacher had to give information. Now, that's just not the case. So what we're seeing now is teachers have become facilitators. We're going to facilitate what you're passionate about, and we're going to give you a chance to dig deeper into those kind of things.
Okay, I just want to tease this out just a little bit more. You're in math class. How is my student attending one of your schools in Northern Cass, in North Dakota? How are they learning math?
So typically, I'll give an example. I have a math teacher who will do a little 5 to 8 minute lesson. And then after that, they're going to do some online things, and then they're going to do something that's project-based, something that's going to say it's very relevant and authentic, that's going to say like, oh, polynomials. Like, I'm not a math guy. I don't know what a polynomial really means, but she does. And so she'll say, like, this is how we're going to do that, and we're going to make it so it's very, very authentic so that you can take that information and you can apply it outside of the school. So the idea of like, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to do 35 problems, that doesn't exist anymore, and it doesn't need to exist anymore.
So they have to prove that they know what a polynomial is, and then once they've done that, that's their competency, and then they can move on. But what about me? Maybe I haven't learned yet what a polynomial is. Maybe I haven't figured out one of the lessons in my Rapunzel deck, if you will. Does she help? Does that teacher help me?
Oh, absolutely. That's the facilitation part, coaching and conferencing. We tell our teachers we want you to coach kids. So kids will come up, they have a little desk, a spot. Every classroom has a coaching desk. And then they will sit there and coach those kids. So they're getting individual feedback instead of like, hey, everybody, let's just do it this way. They're getting the feedback they need as an individual learner at that time.
It's not everybody go to page 27.
Never.
Right?
And we're a district that we don't have a textbook. None. We don't have textbooks in our district.
All right, we're all moving to North Dakota with our kids. All right, Kanisha, speaking of sort of personalization, you did this really cool thing. You started a micro school.
Yes.
What is a micro school? Why'd you start it? And who are you helping and how?
Sure. So I started the micro school because first I was working with the No Child Left Behind initiative, and I saw that the students coming into the tutoring program were not engaged. They were completely disengaged because they could not connect to the material through worksheets and just computer-based programming. So what I decided to do was create a multi-sensory program in my attic that actually engaged kids using all senses. Well, that spiraled out quickly, and now we actually have 5,000 square feet of space where we help 60 neurodivergent learners, autism, dyslexia, students facing remediation, complete project-based learning throughout the day. One huge component of our program is real-world readiness, and we believe that comes from reading and math support. So our students, we've got to focus heavily on ensuring they can read well on their own, but it can't just be a workbook that bores them. It's got to be using all the senses, getting out in the field, going to your local grocery stores. We walk to Lowe's. Something as simple as that can teach phonics. So just understanding that classroom instruction doesn't happen in four walls. Our schools don't have any desks. Our kids have pillows, we have floor seating, spiral chairs. Everything is super non-traditional. Our slogan is not your typical school. Our students receive therapy one-on-one if they need it each week. We have a dyslexia learning lab, a STEM lab that's open 24/7, so students are able to engage in their interests. And their self-esteem is now soaring because they have that small group support that they need to be successful.
So how do you measure success? How does we met with your governor yesterday from Georgia.
Yes.
How do you tell him that you're succeeding and you want the ability to do more of that?
So success for us is not a standardized test. For us, success is our students being able to all read at an 8th grade level at a minimum before they graduate. Success for us is students having real-world math knowledge. We believe that the measure of success should be those two standards only, combined with critical thinking. So at our school, our students are mastering phonetic skills each week. Can they spell it? Can they write it in a paragraph? For math, can you go into Kohl's and understand what 10% off means? Do you know if you buy a car that 25% interest is not as well as 3% interest? And so for us, we'd love to see just the standardized test model change to basic math, basic reading, and critical thinking. If you have those three areas, you can be successful.
But will they get social studies? Will they get some exposure to? Do you stand up and talk about presidents and Black History Month and everything else so that they learn about their world?
Yes, what's beautiful about our program is that each subject is intertwined into every class. So if you're in language arts this morning, you do your phonetics lesson, but they're also working on a Black History Month program, and we're visiting our capital next week. So they're creating a PowerPoint this morning
So
as we
cool.
speak. So all the subjects are intertwined every hour. It's a beautiful thing, and it works. I call it a homeschool method. My mom homeschooled me. She's not a college teacher, but her method worked. I taught myself, and what I needed to be successful was a basic 8th grade reading and math education. And that's what we want our kids to do, so then they can choose their own paths.
Was that interesting for you, coming from your perspective, Brian, when you learned and met not just Kanisha and Corey, but the other members of the Yas Prize and Stop Awards community? And we'll make sure that's all linked in the script here and what you guys read, so people listening and watching can hear more about that. But like, was it weird for you to go like, oh, I'm a ed tech guy, and there's someone doing a micro school, and there's this rural community, and there'll be more people in the next episode? Tell me about your experience and your your aha moment.
I think that it really was like transformative, kind of meeting all of the semifinalists and quarterfinalists through the Yas Prize, and it was unbelievable to see that it's like you have a micro school versus a public school district, and both are looking at this idea of like personalized, almost thematic learning. And it really is how we learn as adults. It's like when you dive into thinking about like when cryptocurrencies, it's like there are math skills, but there's understanding what is this, there's the political ramifications. So I think that what was really cool is just seeing the breadth of solutions that are being used to kind of address student learning and meet students where they already are. And
Did you know that existed?
I honestly didn't even know micro schools existed when I walked into the Forbes Center, and then I was like, I need to learn about these. And it was like reading through, I was like, this is brilliant. So I think that was really eye-opening, and yeah, we just get stuck in our box sometimes where it's like, okay, we go to the public schools, we go to the charter schools, and I didn't have that exposure to kind of all the work.
How are you educated?
I went to private school and then private university. So it was kind of like, I always knew like my parents chose for me. They wanted me to go to a different school, and I was one of the kids that I studied math from a textbook and very traditional system. And for me, it was fine. For my younger brother, really struggled, didn't enjoy it. And so it was trying to figure out, like, we all learn differently. So it makes sense that there's different ways to educate successfully.
And what opened your eyes to wanting to help initially Chicago's least advantaged kids?
Yeah, so my partner Miles and I, we met freshman year of high school, and my partner's Black, grew up on the south side of Chicago, and he was really interested in investing, but it was always like, why is my partner Miles the exception? Like, why isn't this the norm? And so we went to, freshman year of high school was 2008, so there was a lot to talk about with the financial crisis. Right. And it was trying to see, there were so many negative implications that particularly affected the Black community during 2008. So it was like, if we don't start teaching financial literacy, history's going to repeat itself. And so it was trying to really figure out, how can we both my parents were investment bankers, so I grew up totally living in finance, talking about the stock market. And it was like, this needs, in order not even to kind of grow financial services, but more so just to have informed voters, you need to understand, why are politicians making this decision? Because a lot of the biggest stakeholders in the world are making decisions based on finances.
Exactly.
And it's like, so how can you read the newspaper without understanding what is the S&P 500? And trying to understand that side of things.
Well, and now most states, or many states at least, I'm not sure how many, require financial literacy. Do you know the number?
27 are either mandating it or it's kind of in legislation right now.
Yeah, it's part of the curriculum and stuff, so hopefully we can grow. So Corey, talk about when you walked into this crazy tapestry of organizations that have been accumulating to get together. First, why did you? Like, what did you need? You're a traditional public school district, right? You don't need all these crazy people around the country to get in a room with. You're busy. Like, what was it that you saw, and how is it helping you? Not because I want to be bragging about the Yas Prize, the Stop Awards, and the work we do at, in education policy, but like, because I think it's so interesting that people are stepping out to offer and share what they have.
Yeah, I mean, this was an eye-opening experience for me. Like, charter schools, school choice, I mean, North Dakota, besides private schools, there is none. And I was adamant that, like, why would we even consider such a thing? And then when I started to hear from people about why they did it and their purpose behind it, I thought, That makes a lot of sense. And for me, it was, all right, what do I need to do to make my public school even better? So it does become a school of choice that everybody wants to be there. And then figure out, like, what can we do with other public schools to make sure that they're doing the same things? Like, we can do what some of the charter schools are doing if we just put our minds to it and put the effort into it. What I've learned through this whole process is, like, there's these just beautiful people that have put their whole heart and soul into helping kids. And if there's anything I've learned that I will take with me through this whole process, is everybody just wants to be a little bit better for kids. And that was the thing that when I walked out, I think in Miami, when I walked out, I thought, man, there's 32 people there that just want to do what's right for kids. And I'm like, there's more people that just want to do what's right for kids in this country. So, like, what can we do to, like, use our collective powers, collective, superpowers in a way, to try to do better for kids?
And I think we're learning that as we go around Washington this week, right? And I'd love you to reflect a little bit on that. And when you reference Miami, you're talking about we had this 1 week accelerator because we're also trying to meld education and business and help you all become better, help you learn to pitch. That's how some of you got chosen. Not that it was dependent on your pitches, but we're kind of into that because, again, education should not be siloed. People tend to think there's education, there's economics, there's energy, there's foreign policy. Like, the only thing that actually is true through all sectors is we all have that education piece in common, or attempting to get it, right? And so think about how, like, we have to integrate. And what we're finding is, as we talk to these lawmakers, it's opening up their minds too. I might not be on an education committee. Education may not be my priority this year. Maybe I'm dealing with some other crisis. But you're opening their eyes to why they have to be thinking about it. Right. Have you seen that in some of your visits? And then what about with your colleagues?
I have. I'll tell you, in Augusta, where I'm from, only 26% of students are reading at a third grade level and above. So what can we do to increase the number of students reading without having to, pull them all to public school? That's not realistic. But in Georgia, we have the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship. So if students could access that funding and it allowed parents to pay for tutoring or pay for a private school, we are reaching the masses at a lot, faster rate. And I think that sometimes when you think of our political leaders, they're open to it. They just don't know that it's out there. They don't know that there are hundreds of micro schools in Georgia. The VELA Fund, they introduced me to hundreds of people doing the same thing I'm doing. So imagine if each one of us could speak with our local representative in our city and they knew what we were doing, and every city in Georgia had a little micro school that helped these students that were behind. We can still bring about change. So sometimes it seems so broad, but it's you guys are showing us that we can narrow this down to help, multiple kids at once.
So how do we solve for this problem, Corey, on the lack of understanding and knowledge? Like, how come maybe during COVID, again, people were like, oh my God, this is awful, it's happening in schools. But it feels like, are people starting to go back and be apathetic again about, like, what do we have to do to really elevate people's understanding?
Yeah, I mean, educators, no matter public, private, charter, whatever, are under attack right now. I mean, people, during COVID, we were superheroes. And it was amazing. Like, people were like, they'd line the streets and say, thank you for what you did. And 2 years later now, it's like the evil. And it drives me crazy. And like, it hurts because nobody went into education for the money. There's not a person that said, I want to go make a lot of money, I'm going to go be a teacher. So honestly, what I think has to happen is they've got to get in our schools. The last time a lot of our legislators were in school was when they were in school. They need to see what's happening. They need to see the little miracles that happen. They need to see what a kindergartner is capable of and what a senior is capable of. They just don't understand what goes on in our schools. And I think, like, to me, that should be the one requirement for every legislator anywhere is get into our schools. Please come talk to our teachers and see what we're doing and see how amazing what we're doing every day.
And in your message, and many of you also have been saying to people, which is, again, one of the reasons you're here, we need flexibility. Just let us do the work, right? It may not be the school that I would go to if I had that choice. But let me decide based on what you decide, right? Let me decide if I'm going to micro school. Let me decide about what's there. Do people think what you do is weird, given where you come from? Like, oh, I'm doing this app I'm getting to save education. Like, they think it's bizarre?
Yeah, it definitely, I was kind of, I had this life plan by 9 years old. I'm like, I'm going to go to investment banking. And so it all kind of, Rapunzel started as almost a hobby senior year. It was like a passion project for my partner and I. And the day of my graduation, we got invited to pitch at TechCrunch in New York. And I was like, okay, this is a sign. So I skipped graduation and kind of rolled into this. And 5 years later, it was like, oh, wow, okay, this is what we're doing. But to echo Corey's point of just kind of this, what happened with COVID, I think, is there was this huge divergence where some people said, okay, I just want to return to normal. And then I think a lot of us were like, well, normal wasn't getting the job done. And it's like, so, and that's where I think the STOP idea, like, it was like we did, in COVID, we had this opportunity.
What's STOP stand for?
Sustainable, transformational, outstanding, and permissionless. And I think that it is trying to figure out ways, like, we did stop and we kind of thought, like, wait a minute, like, we could be doing it this way. We could be thinking differently about how we're educating. And so you have one side that is kind of demonizing educators for wanting progress and wanting to change the status quo, which isn't working.
Right.
And so now it's trying to figure out, there's a lot of vested interests in the status quo that are kind of like, we like selling our textbooks. We don't like personalized thematic learning because that's not how we've built our business. And so I think that there's always going to be that tension with people who are kind of making progress.
And they also don't know how money is spent or how policies are made. I think there's a lot of assumption. I used to say, God rest her soul, my mother was my Jane Q. Public, right? That's that expression for like, you're just every person on that street. And she'd say, I don't understand what you do. I don't understand. Like, you went to good public schools. Like, why do you keep criticizing schools? I'm like, I went to good public schools, but did you know 30% of my graduating class in a middle class public school in New Jersey actually didn't graduate with me? They were sent to technical schools before. Not that I have a problem with that, but they weren't given a choice. No one said to my friend, do you want to be a beautician? They just sent her because her scores weren't good. They were tracking. My mother's like, what do you mean they were tracking? I said, I was a good student. I was tracked into college prep.
Yeah.
That's right.
They were tracked out of class. And I've talked to some of them since, and they didn't want to do that. And so there's this perception that you go to a good school in a good community, and then you go to Chicago public schools, and it's all about money. And now we have this Pennsylvania State Supreme Court, another case that says the reason schools are not doing well is you're not getting enough money, but yet enrollment's down and the money keeps going up. So let's close this with like helping people, at least we can't give them all the answers, but how do they get curious and learn what they need to know so they can be active and engaged in policy, in making good decisions about how to help others access schools? Let's start with Brian and go down the line.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking back to when we had our accelerator in Miami, and there was that interesting presentation of like, look, you guys run a business. Running a school is a business, and your customers are the parents and the students. And so I think that idea of like, I'm sick and tired of kind of like, oh, we're going to throw more money at Chicago public schools. It's like, I remember in high school, we had every kid can code. 4 years later, we figured out 65% of schools don't have computers. So it's like, it's not just throwing money at it. It's like trying to provide dollars behind like evidence-based solutions that are working and trying to really follow the students. And I think that by viewing the parents as your customers, it's kind of, it adds more credibility that people are like, oh, you're in education. And it's like, no, it's the same as everything else. Like, you have to produce outcomes or you're not going to be around.
Yeah, no, it's a public enterprise. It's not just education.
Right.
Kanisha.
I have to say that I love the YASPRA's website, because if you feel as though your child is not getting what they need, it's a great place to start to just browse the different types of programs. I mean, when we were in the accelerator, you've got Black Mothers Forum, Engage Detroit. These aren't schools, these aren't private schools, but they're still doing a lot in their community and they're empowering parents. So how can we empower parents more? Go to yaspras.org, see some of the groups that are doing that, see the micro schools, see the public schools that are innovating. It's a great place to start.
It's great. Corey.
There's no other occupation career field that has resisted change as much as public education. And it drives me crazy. Like we're okay doing the same thing we've done when I was in high school many, many years ago, and when my dad was in high school and my grandpa. That's not acceptable. It's just not acceptable. So either we start doing what's right for kids, we start looking at doing things different, or we lose a generation of kids. And I mean, we have to be prepared that we're going to lose a generation of kids, which means we lose a generation of leaders, which means this country takes a step back. Like, this is a life and death situation we are in this country right now, and we have to do better. And I'm a public school advocate. We have to do better in public schools, and we have to take and steal and borrow from our people that are doing amazing things in the charter schools and in our tech companies. Like, it has
Everywhere.
to change, everybody, or else we're in a significant, it's going to be a really significant problem in this country if we don't do it.
I hope more and more people hear that, listen to it, repeat that, and learn about educators and innovators like the ones that are in front of me now. If you are listening on podcast in Piazza, do check out also the video, because you would love to see this show. And thank you for being with me in Piazza today, Brian, Kanisha, and Corey. Check us out. Do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And until the next episode, ci vediamo.